Why
Yeah.
would you say there's potential for fuckery?
I think, yeah, if you want to start going into layer one, I think we should start with layer one. Describe like the properties of that and distinguish that from layer two. And then I feel like layer three is a little more ambiguous because I think Fetty, Cashew, Liquid, all those things are kind of different. But we can start with layer one if Jacob or Mateus want to go.
Alrighty. Well, layer one, I guess you can think of it, and we'll compare it to what most people are familiar with, which is like cash money or like gold bars. And so, the audience listening may be already familiar with this, but if people are listening to the recording or this is used for content later on, layer one Bitcoin is referred to as like the main chain or the base layer. And so if somebody sends you a Bitcoin transaction and it has been confirmed and you hold the private key to that address, you own Bitcoin on the main chain. You can think of that like the very top of the diagram that we're about to break down. You can think of that as the number one thing that you want to own that has like the most power in terms of self-custody and sovereignty and your spending ability. And the reason that is because there's nobody who has access or can really do anything to negate your spending power in any way if you have Bitcoin on the main chain. You can think of it like having cash in your pocket or like gold bars buried in your backyard. The difference in the cash or the gold bar scenario is if you have cash in the bank, sure, it's still your money to a degree, but you have to ask the bank's permission. And they can impose unnecessary fees or just outright block your transaction or even reverse it. And whereas if you have cash in your pocket, nobody can prevent you from spending. They can make it prohibitive to spend because cash is kind of hard to carry, especially cross borders. Same with gold. But nobody can really stop you from making that transaction. You don't have to ask for permission. And same thing with gold. If you've got your gold with an trusted custodian that you trust, sure, hopefully that gold is there, and hopefully they don't block your transaction, but it doesn't have the same spending ability as if you just had it. It's more convenient for sure, because verifying gold and transacting in it and traveling around with it is quite difficult, but you do not have true ownership of it. So everything that I just said, you can think of that as like layer one. Holding the asset itself has true spending power. Nobody can stop you, and you truly own it. The trade-off is that it can be kind of expensive to actually send, even at current rates, it's relatively pricey, but in the future, these prices will go up. It is going to happen. It's actually a good thing for a number of reasons. We won't get into it right now. It's actually a good thing and it has to happen, but it will be expensive. And so to combat this, what has happened is there are now different layers stacked on top of that main chain security. The most common one is Lightning. So Lightning is referred to as like a second layer. And what you do to create a Lightning channel is you essentially take that Bitcoin that's on the main chain and you lock it up with another person, and you say, hey, we're going to lock up these funds and we're now able to transact back and forth with each other on a second layer known as Lightning. And this has a large benefit in terms of fees. The fees to send the Bitcoin back and forth is almost non-existent. It's extremely cheap. The trade-off is that to receive funds or to even send them, your node has to be on 24/7. And it also it's not as self-sovereign as main chain. It can't be by its design. There's, I'm going to use a bit of a abrasive term. There's the potential for fuckery is the best way I can phrase it. So that's like in a nutshell, a breakdown between layer one and layer two.
Why would you say there is potential for fuckery on the layer two?
Yeah. So it gets a little bit technical, but when you're opening a Lightning channel, like I mentioned, you're essentially locking up those funds with somebody else's node. And that is what actually gives you the ability to transact back and forth. Now, when I say there's the potential for fuckery, if their node is offline and you're using them as the primary router, you won't be able to send any funds. They also can close that channel at any point, and then you will not be able to send any funds. There's also the potential for them to broadcast an old state of that channel, and they could take more funds than they're actually entitled to. So these are not very common if you're using a well-known public node that you're connected to. Like I have one connected to Start9, for example. There's a whole bunch of them, and these are unlikely, but they are possible. So it's just something to be aware of.